The black void of space was vast and unforgiving, a cold expanse that stretched beyond comprehension. Yet, for all its emptiness, it was now filled with the soundless advance of an unstoppable force, the Imperials. The Empire, an ancient galactic. Civilization had stretched its influence across countless star systems, devouring everything in its path. Their conquest was relentless, their technology unmatched, their warriors feared across the galaxies. For centuries, they had swept through the cosmos, dismantling civilizations and claiming worlds as their own. Earth, a mere speck in the vastness of space, was now their next target. Commander Gyrix stood on the command deck of the flagship Imperious Vengeance, his cold, reptilian gaze fixed on the holographic display before him. His Empire's fleet, nearly 200 ships strong, was advancing through the solar system. Each vessel gleamed with the promise of devastation, their weapon systems ready for action, their shields impenetrable. To Gyrix, the human race was a curiosity, nothing more than an anomaly to be erased. He had heard of Earth before, from his intelligence officers, and was not impressed. Their most advanced technology barely reached the level of the primitive spacefaring species that the Empire had destroyed centuries ago. Nuclear bombs, chemical, propulsion systems, and rusted metal ship's trinkets compared to the Empire's might. Gyrix had crushed empires far older and more advanced than this one. Earth would be no different. His hands gripped the cool metal railing before him, and he felt the familiar surge of excitement and power. He would make Earth's destruction an example to the rest of the galaxy. His reputation would only grow. As his fleet moved inexorably toward their target, "They are insignificant," Gyrix muttered to himself, his voice low but filled with certainty. His eyes flicked to the tactical display, where the small blue planet was now in view. Prepare the fleet for the final assault. As the massive ships continued their approach, Gyrix's mind drifted to the humans. He had expected their leaders to cower, their governments to surrender without a fight, as they had done on countless other worlds. But something about this insignificant planet disturbed him. There were whispers of strange, inexplicable occurrences from their defense systems, rumors of scientific breakthroughs hidden in their laboratories. A part of him wondered if the humans had something more up their sleeve than they let on. But that was a small concern, easily dismissed by the overwhelming force of his fleet. On Earth, in a dimly lit conference room, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in front of a small group of military officials. The air was thick with tension as she delivered her final warning. "We've run out of time," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. "The fleet is almost within striking distance. If we don't act now, Earth will be destroyed." Her words fell on skeptical ears. The leaders around the table exchanged glances, many of them still hesitant to believe that the threat was as real as she insisted. The transmissions from the Empire had been vague, diplomatic in tone, but laced with underlying threats. Diplomatic channels were still open, though no response had been received from the Empire's side. Red tape, bureaucracy. There was always a delay in the face of a threat like this, but Elena knew better. She had studied the patterns of galactic conquest. This was no empty threat. The Empire was coming, and they would not stop until they had conquered Earth or destroyed it. "Elena, we understand your concerns," General McAllister said, his voice calm but dismissive. "But we don't have the intelligence to confirm the scale of this threat. They could just be posturing. We need to proceed carefully." Elena's patience was wearing thin. Carefully? She slammed her hand against the table, the noise echoing in the otherwise quiet room. "The Empire doesn't negotiate, they destroy. And by the time you've gathered enough data to confirm the danger, it will be too late. We don't have time for caution. We need to launch a counteroffensive now." Her plea hung in the air, met with resistance and uncertainty. Earth's leaders had spent years dismissing her warnings. assuming that the galaxy's most formidable threat was far away, out of reach. Now, the storm was on their doorstep, and they were paralyzed by indecision. Her frustration boiled over, and she turned to face the view of Earth outside the window, her eyes narrowing. She had warned them. And now, she would act alone if she had to. Outside the conference room, the tension within Earth's military base grew by the hour. The first signs of the fleet's advance were beginning to show on Earth's radar systems, an unmistakable mass of ships heading toward them. Each one was a potential harbinger of death. She knew that the technology they were facing was far beyond anything humanity could muster. But she also knew something they didn't. The humans had one advantage. They hadn't even begun to understand that Dr. Vasquez had spent years developing a weapon one she had kept secret for as long as possible. She had thought they would never need it, that the galaxy would leave Earth to its primitive ways. But now, as the fleet drew closer, she knew there was no other choice. In the conference room, General McCallister's voice broke through the silence. "All right, Elena, we'll move forward with your plan. But if this fails, don't worry." Elena interrupted, her voice steady. "It won't fail." Her resolve was unwavering. The battle for Earth had begun, and humanity would not go quietly into the night. The Empire's fleet loomed ever closer, casting its dark shadow over Earth's defenses. For Jirix and his forces, this was just another conquest, another victory in a long line of achievements. He sat calmly in the command chair of imperious vengeance, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest, his eyes fixed on the holographic map before him. "It is almost time," he muttered to himself, the excitement in his voice barely contained. The data streams from his fleet told him everything he needed to know. Earth's defenses were primitive, nothing more than a few scattered military installations. Their cities were filled with civilians weak and terrified. Their military force was a laughable attempt to stop him. He had seen it all before. "Commander," came the voice of his tactical officer, a towering figure with silvery scales. "We're nearing the target planet. The outer defensive perimeter is showing minimal resistance. I recommend a full-scale bombardment." Shyrix's lips curled into a thin smile. "Do it." The order was given, and the massive fleet began its descent toward Earth's atmosphere. Weapon systems hummed to life, their energy signatures pulsing through the void. Thousands of plasma cannons aimed at the blue and green planet below. The first volley was launched, a brilliant flash of energy streaking across the sky, heading for the first of Earth's cities. The shockwave of the blast was felt even from the command deck, vibrating through the ship. Below, Earth's military response was almost immediate. The first squadron of human aircraft, clumsy, outdated fighter jets, took to the sky, their engines roaring as they accelerated toward the invaders. Dr. Vasquez watched in disbelief as they launched their assault, helpless against the oncoming storm. The humans were brave, but they were hopelessly outmatched. The Imperial's weapons were capable of eradicating entire cities in a single strike, while the humans had only metal alloys and primitive weapons. "I've never seen anything like it," a military officer whispered, watching the jets disappear into the distance. "They're charging at the Empire's fleet as if they have a chance." Dr. Vasquez's heart sank. She understood the necessity of the human response, but she also knew it was futile. These fighters were nothing more than distractions, pitiful attempts to halt the inevitable. The Empire's ships, equipped with energy shields that could absorb the force of star explosions, were impervious to the primitive metal projectiles the humans fired. Still, she felt the stirring of something else within her, something deep and fierce. The instinct to fight, to protect the home she loved, had always been strong within her. And though she knew they had no chance against the sheer power of the Empire, there was a glimmer of hope buried beneath the weight of this seemingly hopeless war. At the Human Defense Headquarters, chaos reigned. Military commanders barked orders over the combs, trying to make sense of the incoming onslaught. "Where are the reinforcements?" shouted General McAllister, his face grim as the first barrage of plasma blasts lit up the sky above the city. "They're coming, sir," replied a junior officer, his hands trembling as he adjusted the monitors. But it might be too late. Dr. Vasquez stood by the back wall, watching the chaos unfold. She could see the fear in the eyes of the soldiers, the uncertainty that clouded their decision-making. Earth had spent so many years locked away, focused on their own small problems, that they had never fully prepared for the day the galaxy would come knocking. "General," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice calm and unwavering despite the panic around her. "It's time. We have no more time to waste." General McAllister turned to her. Confusion and skepticism painted across his face. "What are you talking about? The fleet is already here. We're outgunned and outmatched. There's nothing—" "Let me do this," she interrupted, stepping toward him with an air of authority that startled him. "You have no idea what we're facing." "I do." McAllister hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. "You have one chance, Dr. Vasquez. If this doesn't work, it will work," she said, her voice low, but filled with the quiet certainty of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. She turned on her heel and moved toward the control center, her mind already focused on the weapon she had designed. Meanwhile, as the Imperial fleet continued its barrage, the human fighters flew ever closer to their enemies. A handful of them managed to fire off a few missiles, but each attempt was met with the same result: plasma blasts that obliterated their craft in an instant. Their sacrifice was noble, but in vain. Jyrix watched the spectacle through his command screen, the human aircraft nothing more than sparks in the void as they were extinguished one by one. He grinned, amused by their futile resistance. But as he leaned back in his chair, he noticed something strange aflicker in the data streams. One of his cruisers had reported an anomaly. It wasn't much, just a minor glitch in the targeting system, but it was the first sign of something he couldn't explain. "It's nothing," Jyrix muttered, trying to dismiss the concern. But his hand hovered over the controls, unease creeping into his mind. He focused on the display, watching Earth's largest cities burn, feeling the satisfaction of each destruction. Still, a nagging thought remained. Something wasn't quite right. On the ground, Dr. Vasquez's heart raced as she entered the high-tech lab that had been hidden beneath Earth's most secure military facility. The weapon, years in the making, was ready. She had spent countless hours tweaking the quantum manipulation technology, learning how to harness the fundamental forces of space and time itself. "Activate the primary matrix," she ordered, her voice steady despite the rising tension in the air. The system hummed to life as the first energy pulses surged through the machinery. A holographic map of Earth flickered into view, pinpointing the Empire's fleet with precise accuracy. Dr. Vasquez's fingers flew over the controls, activating the quantum field stabilization. She had one shot, one chance to stop this war before it obliterated everything. The system powered up, the hum growing louder as it built in intensity. Earth's last hope had begun. Above, the Empire's fleet continued its advance, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit them. Not as the Empire's fleet loomed above Earth, their weapons primed and ready to obliterate the planet beneath them. Dr. Vasquez stood at the control console, her fingers trembling but steady. The room around her buzzed with a constant, electric hum, an unsettling sound for what she was about to attempt. It was a sound of raw potential, the kind that made her blood run cold. The quantum manipulation weapon was a risk, but it was also humanity's only chance. Energy levels stabilizing, the technician at her side reported, his voice cracking under the pressure. The weapon was ready, but the question that hung in the air was whether it would work. Dr. Vasquez's mind raced. She had designed the weapon to manipulate the very fabric of reality, bending space-time itself, altering the way matter and energy interacted. It was the result of years of secret research, built from the cutting-edge knowledge of quantum mechanics, paired with human ingenuity. A weapon that could make the impossible possible. But could it stop the Empire? She glanced at the monitors, once more watching the Imperial fleet's movement on the screen. Their position was precise. Too precise. The first wave of plasma beams was already being aimed at Earth's largest cities. There was no time for hesitation. "Begin the sequence," she commanded, her voice calm, but with an underlying strain that betrayed the weight of the moment. Her team responded immediately, starting the countdown. Outside, the skies above Earth were darkening as the lead Imperial ships began their final approach. Gyrix, aboard the Imperious Vengeance, watched with quiet satisfaction as the first wave of energy blasts exploded into Earth's atmosphere. He could feel the tremors of destruction vibrating through space, as if the universe itself was acknowledging his victory. But then something strange happened. The plasma blast intended for New York City stopped mid-air, frozen in time as if the very laws of physics had stopped working. Gyrix's eyes narrowed, disbelief creeping into his cold gaze. His fingers hovered above his console, analyzing the anomaly. "Captain," he said sharply, "what is this? Report." The captain of the Imperious Vengeance rushed to the screen, his multiple eyes scanning the data. "Commander, our targeting systems are ... malfunctioning. The energy blast ... it ... It stopped. It didn't reach the surface." "What do you mean, it didn't reach the surface?" Gyrix demanded, his voice rising with irritation. "Explain. The data is confusing," the captain replied, looking at the numbers in growing horror. "It appears as though the energy is ... shifting. It's like the plasma is being altered before it even touches the atmosphere." Gyrix's scales prickled. He couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. The humans were primitive, unworthy of his attention. How could they have developed technology that could stop a blast from his fleet? It was impossible. But as he looked closer, he saw more anomalies. Ships began to lose power in their system shields flickering, weapons failing. The flawless execution of his invasion suddenly felt like an uncertain gamble. And then, to his horror, his main communication screen flickered and went black. A voice cut through the eerie silence of the command deck. It was calm, measured, and disturbingly confident. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Terran Global Defense Initiative. You have 30 seconds to cease hostilities and withdraw from our system." Gyrix's heart sank. A human voice. But it wasn't just any human voice. It was broadcasted directly into his fleet's secure military channel, something that only high-ranking military officials in his own empire had access to. How could this be? Earth had no such capabilities. This was no ordinary human. For a moment, Gyrix could only stare at the screen in disbelief. How did they know his language? How were they able to breach his fleet's encrypted channels? The voice continued, as though it were all too casual, as though humanity were in complete control of the situation. "You have 30 seconds to stop this or face complete eradication. Cease fire immediately." Gyrix's tail lashed behind him in agitation. He looked to his officers, but they were just as perplexed as he was. What was happening? "Activate the shield generators at full power," Gyrix ordered. "Prepare for countermeasures." But it was already too late. The shields of his flagship, the Imperious Vengeance, began to fluctuate erratically. It wasn't a malfunction. No, this was something far more insidious. Gyrix watched in mounting dread as the ship's status indicators started to show red, warning of system failures in multiple sectors. Nothing in his empire's vast technological arsenal could explain this sudden vulnerability. "This is impossible," the captain murmured, his voice breaking. And then, as the countdown hit 0, the impossible happened. The Imperial fleet stopped moving. Not a single vessel fired its weapon. The screens were filled with the same unsettling anomaly, a bending of space, like waves rippling through water. But it wasn't a visual distortion. The ships, those giant, terrifying warships of the Empire, were freezing in place, locked in an immovable stasis, as if time itself had been altered. Shyrix's claws gripped the console, his mind reeling with confusion. His fleet had never encountered such a force. The weapons were still aimed at Earth, but they had no power. Their systems were locked frozen in a moment where they could do nothing. Dr. Vasquez's voice returned, calm but firm. "Commander Shyrix, you've overestimated your position. The Empire's expansionist policies have been observed for centuries, and now your military is being neutralized." Shyrix stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. His empire's greatest weapon, its fleet, was useless. The laws of physics no longer applied. The human race, the primitive species he had expected to wipe out in a matter of hours, had just done what no other species had ever been able to do. They had rewritten the rules of existence. And with that revelation, Shyrix's entire understanding of power, of what it meant to conquer, was shattered. He was no longer the predator. The humans had become the apex species, and the true war had just begun. But now, a new fear began to rise within him. What would happen next? The stasis grip on the fleet lasted only a moment, but to Commander Shyrix, it felt like an eternity. His eyes darted from screen to screen, searching for any sign that his ships were coming back online, but there was nothing. The ships remained, locked in place, as if suspended in a moment outside of time itself. He growled in frustration, his sharp teeth bared, but there was no sound in the command room beyond the soft hum of malfunctioning systems. "Report," Shyrix barked, his voice sharp with urgency. We can't make sense of the data, Commander." The captain responded, his voice trembling. "Our systems are completely locked. The quantum matrix, it's like it's been reset. We have no control. Every system is stalled." Shyrix's tail lashed behind him in a fit of frustration. He stood up abruptly, his body radiating a cold fury. "How could this be? We're the Empire. We have conquered entire galaxies. And now this insignificant species." He cut himself off, knowing that his anger was only betraying his mounting fear. He had never been in a position where his fleet, his empire, had been rendered powerless. Not like this. Not with no enemy in sight, no weapons fired, no attack launched. It was as if Earth itself was fighting back with the very laws of reality. "Do you have any idea what happened?" he demanded of his officers, his voice like a whip. "Unknown, Commander." "All we know is that we've been," the officer's voice faltered as the sensors flickered, another round of system failures spreading across the fleet. Then, before Shyrix could demand more answers, a voice cut through the eerie silence again. It was calm, controlled, like the ticking of a metronome, each word deliberate and methodical. "Commander Shyrix, I believe I've explained the situation quite clearly. You are at the mercy of our technology now. We have no desire to destroy you or your fleet, but you must understand, we cannot allow your empire to continue its path of conquest. You've had your chance." Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice echoed through the fleet's communication systems once more, and this time Shyrix felt the full weight of her words. The idea that a single species, a species he had deemed so weak, could hold his entire fleet at bay was incomprehensible. It was a wound to his pride, a blow to everything he had ever believed about power. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. To understand how humanity could have accomplished such a feat. He had heard whispers from his scouts, rumors of strange occurrences near Earth, but no one had taken those stories seriously. He had dismissed them as nothing more than superstition. He had been wrong, and now there was no way to undo his mistake. "Release us," Shyrix commanded, his voice now less certain, tinged with desperation. "We demand immediate release from this stasis. You will not destroy us. We will retaliate." "Doctor," Vasquez's voice responded without hesitation, "you've already been neutralized. Your weapons no longer function. Your ships no longer exist in the state you knew them. There is no retaliation you can offer. The era of the Corven Empire's expansion is over. For you, the war is already lost." Shyrix's claws dug into the armrest of his chair as his mind scrambled to find a way out. The fleet was immobilized, their weapons rendered useless. The humans had not even attacked. Not yet. And yet, the result was a crushing defeat. As the realization hit him, his tail flicked nervously. He had led the Corven Empire to countless victories over the centuries, but this was the first time he had faced defeat. And the worst part? He didn't understand how he had been outmatched. His technology, his tactics, everything he knew had been rendered obsolete in an instant. The enemy hadn't even fired a shot. Instead, they had done something far worse. They had simply rewritten reality. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Vasquez stood in the control room, watching the fleet's movements, or rather, the lack of them. She exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling in her bones. The weapon she had helped create, the technology she had risked everything for, had worked. But as she gazed at the screens, she felt the truth of her decision pressing heavily on her. She had broken the boundaries of what was possible, but she wasn't sure if that made her a savior or a villain. "We have them, sir," one of her team members said, her voice filled with awe. "The fleet is frozen." Dr. Vasquez didn't respond immediately. Her eyes flicked back to the screen, where the fleet mighty and proud remained in stasis. It was a victory for humanity, yes, but it was also a terrifying realization of how much power they now held. They had not only stopped the Empire's fleet, but had done so by altering the very fabric of space-time itself. She had known that the Empire would come for Earth one day, but she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected that humanity's greatest challenge would be facing the burden of such power. "Prepare to send another transmission," she said, her voice steady despite the heavy thoughts racing through her mind. "We need to offer them a choice, a way forward. They must understand what has just happened. We will show them why we won't let them conquer again." Her assistant quickly began preparing the communication. "What should we say?" "Tell them that Earth has had enough. They can't simply conquer and destroy. They need to evolve. This ends today." Dr. Vasquez's gaze softened as she stood there, considering what she had just done. She had stopped a war before it even started. But she couldn't ignore the weight of the future. They had won, but what would they do with this new power? Could humanity handle it? Could she? Her mind swirled with questions, but as she turned back toward the now still fleet in the sky, she knew one thing with certainty. Earth had just stepped into a new era. What would come next? That was up to them. The weight of victory settled over Earth like a strange, unearthly fog. The threat of the Corven Empire was suspended in time, but as the stillness stretched into hours, the real battle began, one of decisions, ethics, and the unknown consequences of wielding such power. Dr. Vasquez stood in the control room, staring at the holographic projection of the Imperial fleet locked in stasis, each ship frozen in an unnatural calm. The battle was over, but the war, if it could even be called, was just beginning. Is it over then? A voice behind her asked, breaking the silence. General McAllister, looking more aged and tired than usual, approached her slowly. He had been a man of action, of decisive movements, but now, as humanity's savior and arbiter of peace, his expression was strained. "We stopped them," Dr. Vasquez replied, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But that doesn't mean it's over. Not by a long shot." Her eyes were glued to the screens, showing the fleet in perfect stillness, massive ships that had once been symbols of fear and destruction, now powerless and utterly contained. It was hard to reconcile the reality that the overwhelming force that had come to conquer Earth now lay at their mercy. And yet, in her gut, she knew this power, while impressive, was fragile. The entire structure of galactic civilization, the way empires had risen and fallen for centuries, had just been disrupted. The consequences of this moment could ripple outward in ways humanity could barely fathom. "We have them," McAllister said again, more firmly this time. "This is our chance. We demand their surrender. We have the power." Dr. Vasquez looked at him then, really looked at him, and she saw something in his eyes, something darker than the fear she'd expected. It was a hunger for control, for dominance. He wasn't the only one who could see what this could mean. For Earth, for all of humanity, we don't need to demand their surrender. "General," she said quietly, her voice rising with conviction, "what we do next is just as important as what we've already done. We can't just conquer them in return. We need to make them understand something fundamental." McAllister stiffened, taken aback by the force of her words. "And what's that exactly?" Dr. Vasquez took a deep breath. "That power, true power, doesn't come from domination. It comes from understanding, from cooperation, from learning to live with the galaxy, not against it. If we do this the wrong way, if we turn around and become just like them, what's the point of it all?" She turned away from the console, walking to the large viewport that looked out over the Earth below, a planet now caught between an uncertain past and a dangerous future. Her mind raced as she thought about the power they had at their fingertips, the ability to rewrite the rules of existence itself, to reshape the galaxy however they chose. She had never considered herself a warrior, never believed she would lead humanity into anything more than scientific discovery. And now she was faced with the possibility of guiding Earth into an era of galactic diplomacy or destruction. "We cannot become what we've fought against," she said softly, more to herself than to McAllister. "We cannot fight fire with fire. If we do, we'll become the very thing we fear." McAllister remained silent, and for a moment Dr. Vasquez wondered if her words had reached him. He had been a soldier his whole life, a man who'd commanded armies. War had been his reality. But this new reality was something different, and it terrified him. "I'll make the necessary preparations to send a message to their fleet," he said after a pause. "But this power we have, Elena, we can use it to end them, to ensure they never come back." Dr. Vasquez's heart sank at the look in his eyes, and she knew then that she had to act fast. If humanity was to rise above the mistakes of those who had conquered the stars before them, she needed to take control off narrative. She couldn't let fear or revenge drive them down the same path that the Corven Empire had taken. "General," she began, her voice calm but resolute, "we can end this conflict without annihilating them. We can offer them a choice, one they've never had before. A chance to evolve, to move beyond their conquest-driven mentality. If we destroy them outright, what are we? Just another empire with a bigger weapon." McAllister frowned, still unconvinced. "And what? Let them rebuild and come back for another. Try? You saw their fleet, Elena. You saw their power. There's no negotiating with them. We can't afford to be naive. Her eyes softened. "I know you're scared. We all are. But we can't let that fear make our decisions for us. Look at what we've done already. We stopped them not with force, but with understanding, with knowledge. This can't be the end of our story, General. It has to be the beginning of something more." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the tension between his military mindset and the words she had just spoken. It wasn't easy, she knew. The temptation to wipe out the Empire once and for all, to erase the very threat they had faced from. History was powerful, but it wasn't the right choice. In the command center, the hum of the equipment continued as her team worked on deciphering the data from the stasis lock. It was the most advanced system humanity had ever created, and, as they worked, Alina realized just how much potential they had. If they could do this to the Corven fleet, what else could they do? What else could they change? "Let me send the message," she said finally, her voice steady. "Let me offer them a chance to surrender not to us, but to the idea that they don't need to conquer the galaxy. They need to evolve. We'll provide the technology to help them. They don't have to be who they've been. They can change." McAllister hesitated, his gaze lingering on her, and for a moment, Dr. Vasquez feared that he would push forward with his own plan. But then, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. "Fine," he said, his voice quieter now, more uncertain. "Send the message. But if they refuse, we'll have to finish this the only way we know how." Dr. Vasquez nodded, but the weight of the decision rested heavily on her shoulders. This was humanity's defining moment. Would they rise above the need for vengeance? Or would they, too, become just another empire, driven by the same darkness that had fueled their enemies for centuries? "Prepare the transmission," she ordered. "It's time to give them a choice." As she turned back to the console, the gravity of the situation settled over her. This was more than just a war. It was a turning point for the galaxy. Would humanity rise to the challenge and show the Corven Empire that peace was possible? Or would they repeat the mistakes of the past? The future of the galaxy rested in their hands, and Dr. Vasquez wasn't about to let it slip away. The transmission was ready. Dr. Vasquez watched as the final preparations were made to send us in. Message to the fleet, a message that could either open the door to peace or seal humanity's fate in ways that even she couldn't predict. The control room hummed with tension, the quiet sound of fingers flying over keyboards, and the occasional soft beep from the monitors. Every eye in the room was trained on her, awaiting her command. "We're good to go, Dr. Vasquez," the technician sighed, looking up from his console. "The fleet's still locked in stasis. The message is encrypted and routed directly to their command vessel." Dr. Vasquez nodded, but felt the weight of the decision press against her chest. This wasn't just a technical victory. This was a test of everything humanity stood for. If she failed, if the Empire refused to listen, it wouldn't just be another war. It would be the end of the galaxy's chance for something different. It would be the end of Earth's chance to lead in the way she believed it could. "Send it," she said, her voice unwavering despite the conflict that churned within her. The screen in front of her shifted, the holographic display now showing the towering, imposing figure of Jirix, his face a mixture of disbelief and growing tension. He wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. No one in his empire had expected the humans to turn the tide so decisively. The transmission cut through the stillness of the fleet like a blade. Dr. Vasquez's voice filled the communication channels, calm and precise, but with a gravity that made the room fall silent. "Commander Jirix, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Terran Global Defense Initiative. You have been given a choice. Earth has no desire for destruction, nor do we seek vengeance. We have watched your empire grow. We have seen the damage it has done to the galaxy, but we also understand that power is not the answer. Your fleet is suspended. Your weapons are neutralized. You are at our mercy. But this is not a moment of finality. This is a moment of transformation. The words seemed to hang in the air, every syllable carrying the weight of her years of research, her years of sacrifice. She paused, her eyes scanning the faces of her team. They were waiting. She could feel their hopes, their belief in her vision. You have two choices. One, we continue this path and annihilate everything you've built. We could eradicate you completely, as you have done to countless others. Or two, you can evolve. You can leave behind the legacy of destruction. You can choose to rebuild your empire under a new philosophy, one that does not conquer, but coexists. We will help you. We have the technology to heal the damage you've caused to the galaxy and to your own people. But we cannot, and will not, stand idly by while you continue to destroy. Dr. Vasquez's voice softened, as if extending a hand. Through the digital divide. This is your last chance, Jyrix. We are offering you a way to save what remains of your people. But if you refuse, we will do what we must. This ends now. There was a long silence after the transmission ended. It felt like the whole universe was holding its breath, waiting for the Empire to respond. On the command deck of the Imperius Vengeance, Jyrix remained seated, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair as his mind processed what he had just heard. His cold, calculating nature had been shaken more than he would ever admit. His empire, which had crushed species for centuries, was now faced with the impossible. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of vulnerability. Earth had shown him something he had never seen before. Mercy, yes, but also something deeper, a possibility. He had never believed in cooperation. To him, power was about domination, about proving superiority. Yet here he was, faced with the stark reality that humanity, with all its flaws, had surpassed him. Captain, Jyrix's voice broke the silence, sounding almost hollow in its wake. What do we do now? The captain, who had been standing by the command station, swallowed nervously. Commander, we've never faced an enemy like this. Our fleet is paralyzed. Our weapons are ... ineffective. We single quotes at their mercy. Jyrix's eyes narrowed. He knew his next move would determine the future of his empire. He had lived his entire life to conquer, to rise above the galaxy's others. But now, in this moment, he was confronted with the truth that his empire was nothing more than a relic of a past that could not continue. His pride burned in his chest, but it was nothing compared to the cold realization that their entire approach had been flawed. The humans, with their primitive technology, had done what no other species had ever managed. They had not only fought back, but they had broken the very foundation of his empire's military might. Set up a direct communication. Line, Jyrix ordered, his voice colder now, but with a flicker of something deeper something he didn't quite understand yet. I will respond. A few moments later, the screen flickered, and Dr. Vasquez's face appeared again. This time, the arrogance and bravado she had seen before were gone. In their place was a quiet determination, a respect that she hadn't anticipated. Dr. Vasquez, Jyrix began, his voice rough, as if the weight of what he was about to say had pressed down on him for far too long. You have given me a choice, and for the first time, I am listening. But know this, the Empire does. Not bow. It does not surrender easily. I'm not asking you to bow, Commander, Dr. Vasquez replied, her tone firm yet understanding. I'm asking you to evolve. There is more to the universe than domination. There is more than destruction. Jyrix paused, and for a long moment, it seemed as if the universe itself held its breath. The vast silence between them felt like a lifetime. Finally, he spoke again. his voice filled with a mix of resignation and a flicker of hope, a hope he had long thought extinguished. If we are to evolve, then, we will need your help. The Empire will consider your offer. But understand, this, Dr. Vasquez, we will not forget this day. Neither will we, she replied, her eyes meeting his through the transmission. But we will give you a future, a chance to change. And as the message ended, Dr. Vasquez knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The Corven Empire might bend, but whether they would break free from their ancient ways was still unknown. But for the first time, humanity had offered something greater than war. They had offered peace. And that, for her, was worth everything. As the transmission cut out, Dr. Vasquez let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned to the room full of technicians, military officers, and scientists. "Prepare for whatever comes next," she said, her voice filled with both resolve and uncertainty. "The future is ours to shape, but the work is far from over." The silence that followed Dr. Vasquez's words felt almost suffocating. For a moment, no one in the control room moved, each person suspended in that fragile space between victory and uncertainty. Earth had won for now. The Empire had been stopped. But it was clear that this was only the beginning of a much larger and far more complex challenge. Dr. Vasquez stood before the holographic projection of the Corven fleet, still frozen in space, their massive ships motionless and vulnerable. The weight of what they had just accomplished settled heavily in her chest. She had just offered the Empire a chance at redemption, a chance they had never asked for, and perhaps never even wanted. But the consequences of that offer, the fragile thread of hope she had extended, were unknown. "Status report," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a sharp blade. "We're still holding them in stasis, Dr. Vasquez," a technician replied, glancing nervously at the monitor. "No response yet from the Empire. It seems like they're still processing." Dr. Vasquez nodded, her mind racing. Shyrix's response had been far more subdued than she expected, and that alone sent a chill through her. The Empire had always prided itself on its power, its ability to crush anyone who dared oppose them. For Shyrix to even consider her offer was a shift that she hadn't anticipated. "What are the odds that they'll refuse?" General McAllister asked from behind her, his voice laced with a hint of doubt. Dr. Vasquez turned to face him. "High," she said, though her expression remained calm. "Shyrix is a leader, yes, but the Corven Empire is not one to bend easily. This is a big step for him. It may take time for him to convince his command structure that change is possible." McAllister rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "And if they refuse?" "If they refuse," she replied, her tone unwavering, "then we will have to act. We'll show them that we're serious about both the peace we offer and the consequences of ignoring it." The weight of those words hung in the air, but Dr. Vasquez couldn't afford to hesitate now. The technology they had unleashed, this ability to manipulate the fabric of space-time, was something Earth would have to control, protect, and if necessary, use again. The quantum weapon was not just a deterrent. It was a lifeline, but it could also be a death sentence to anyone who crossed the line. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft beep from one of the monitors. The technician quickly glanced at the screen and then turned to her, his eyes wide with surprise. "Dr. Vasquez, you need to see this." She stepped forward, her heart quickening as the technician worked to bring up the data on the main screen. For a moment, all she could see were lines of encrypted signals. But as the system decrypted the message, it became clear. The Corven Empire was responding. The image of Commander Shyrix appeared on the screen, his face drawn, his usual arrogance replaced by something closer to resolve. The holographic projection of his fleet behind him remained suspended in time, but his posture, his presence, was undeniably different. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. He wasn't just reacting to the offer, he was considering it. "This is Commander Gyrix of the Corven Empire." His voice resonated through the control room, still strong, but laced with a heavy undertone of uncertainty. "We have received your message, Dr. Vasquez, and we are contemplating your offer. The Empire is not built on surrender. It is built on strength, on survival through dominance. But we are not blind. What you have shown us is not just power. It is something far greater, something we have never encountered before." Dr. Vasquez held her breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Gyrix, a leader who had never known defeat, was acknowledging something she never thought possible, the idea that the Corven Empire could evolve. "Your technology. It has frozen our fleet in time," he continued, his words deliberate. "It is not an attack. It is a warning, a message not only to the Empire, but to the galaxy itself. You have shown us what we have overlooked for centuries, that true strength lies not in conquest, but in the ability to transcend the need for it." Dr. Vasquez's heart raced, but she didn't allow herself to show any signs of triumph. This was far from over. There was still the matter of what Gyrix and his empire would do next. "We will consider your offer." Gyrix's voice was firm, yet there was a hesitance beneath it. "But know this, Dr. Vasquez, the Corven Empire does not abandon its way of life without cause. You have forced us to reconsider our future, and for that we thank you. But it is not a simple matter to change the course of an empire. We will require ... guidance. How can we trust that this path will lead us to something better?" Dr. Vasquez knew that this moment would be pivotal. Gyrix was admitting, for the first time in his life, that the Corven Empire could change, that their way of life could be altered. It was unprecedented. "This is not about trust, Commander." Dr. Vasquez sighed, her voice calm yet resolute. "It's about growth, about evolution. You have the opportunity to change, to become something greater than what you were. We will not force you, but we will show you a new way. The technology we've developed, the knowledge we've gained, it's yours to use, to build, to evolve your empire into something that can stand alongside us. Not above us, not below, but alongside." Gyrix's expression hardened, but Dr. Vasquez could see the flicker of something in his eyes. A doubt, perhaps, or a glimmer of hope. "And if we fail?" he asked, his voice tinged with a threat, though it was weak. "If you fail," she replied, meeting his gaze through the transmission, "then we will be forced to act. But I believe, Commander, that you and your empire are capable of more than destruction. You have shown that in this moment." Gyrix did not speak immediately. Instead, his eyes scanned the empty expanse of his fleet, frozen in space and for the first time he seemed to question his purpose. "Give us time, Dr. Vasquez," he said after a long pause. "We will consider what you have offered. We will decide." With that, the transmission ended, leaving Dr. Vasquez to process what had just transpired. The Corven Empire was not defeated. They were at a crossroads, and what they did next would shape the galaxy forever. As Dr. Vasquez turned away from the screen, General McAllister approached her, his face pale but filled with determination. "You've done it, Elena," he said quietly. "The Empire is willing to listen. You've given them a chance. Now we have to make sure they take it." Dr. Vasquez nodded, her mind swirling with the enormity of what had just happened. The path ahead was uncertain, and the fate of the galaxy still hung in the balance. But for the first time, humanity had been given the opportunity to lead not through force, but through understanding. And it was up to them to show the galaxy what true strength really meant. The days following the transmission felt like a surreal, suspended moment in time. The Corven Empire's fleet, once a symbol of terror and dominance, remained frozen in space above Earth, while the rest of the galaxy awaited the next move. Vasquez spent countless hours analyzing the response from Jyrix and his commanders, carefully studying every word, every subtle shift in tone. There was something in his voice that hinted at a profound internal struggle, a desire for change, but also an underlying fear of what that change would cost. General McAllister, ever the pragmatist, was less optimistic. He spent much of his time in closed-door meetings with Earth's highest military officials, preparing for every possible contingency. He was right to be cautious. After all, they had defeated the Empire technologically, yes, but not ideologically. Humanity had gained a powerful tool, but wielding it without a clear sense of direction could just as easily lead to their own downfall. Yet Dr. Vasquez remained steadfast. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was the only path that would truly break the cycle of violence that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. They had the power to change things, but they needed to trust that the Corven Empire was capable of that change. Finally, after days of tense silence, a new transmission came through. The room fell silent as Dr. Vasquez's team worked quickly to decode the message. When the holographic image of Commander Jyrix appeared, it was clear that something had shifted. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced with a hesitant calm that only a few days ago would have seemed impossible. He stood before her again, but this time there was no threat in his posture, no aggression in his voice. "We have considered your offer," Jyrix began, his voice steady, though there was an undeniable weight behind it. "And we have reached a decision." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing with quiet anticipation. This was it, the moment that would either forge a new future for the galaxy or plunge them into an even darker era of conflict. "The Corven Empire is ready to evolve," Jyrix continued, his voice quiet but firm. "We will dismantle our war machine. We will abandon our policy of conquest. We will open our borders to cooperation, to peace. We will work with Earth, with you, to rebuild what has been broken and ensure that no empire rises again." The room was still. The team around Dr. Vasquez exchanged uncertain glances. Jyrix's words were too monumental to believe at face value, but Dr. Vasquez could see it in his eyes. There was a vulnerability there, something that had never been present before. This wasn't a declaration of weakness. It was an admission of change. "Commander," Dr. Vasquez replied, her voice measured but filled with an unwavering hope, "you are taking the first step toward something greater. But understand this, there is no going back. The galaxy is watching, and the choices you make now will define the future of not just your empire, but every species in it." Jyrix nodded, acknowledging the gravity of her words. "We understand, and we are prepared to face the consequences of this choice, whatever they may be." The message was simple, but the weight of it was immeasurable. For the first time in centuries, the Corven Empire had chosen something other than power, other than conquest. They had chosen the difficult, uncertain road of change. Dr. Vasquez turned to General McAllister, who had been standing by silently. He seemed lost in thought, his expression one of cautious optimism. "What now?" he asked, his voice low. "We move forward," she replied, her voice steady but resolute. "Humanity has just made the first step toward leading a new age. But this isn't over. We must rebuild not just Earth, but the galaxy itself. We have to help them, and we have to help ourselves. The Corven Empire may have chosen peace, but there are others who won't." McAllister nodded slowly, understanding what she meant. There were forces in the galaxy who thrived on conquest, who would not accept the collapse of the Empire so easily. There would be others who would rise to challenge this new order, who would see peace as a weakness to exploit. But for now, Humanity had won the first victory. "We'll begin negotiations immediately," Dr. Vasquez said, turning back to the screen. "And we will make sure that this new path isn't just for the Corven Empire, but for all of us. Together, we can reshape the galaxy." Jyrix's image flickered, his voice now filled with the seriousness of his declaration. "We will honor our word, Dr. Vasquez. The Corven Empire will not go back to its old ways. We will work with Earth. We will build a future, not of war, but of cooperation." With that, the transmission ended. Dr. Vasquez stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. The path ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time, humanity was not facing those challenges alone. The Corven Empire, once a galaxy-spanning force of destruction, had chosen peace, and humanity had shown them the way. As she looked out at Earth, bathed in the light of a new dawn, she knew that this was just the beginning. The real work, the real challenge, was ahead, but the galaxy had shifted. A new era had begun, and humanity had a chance to lead it not through conquest, but through understanding, cooperation, and change. The power to shape the future was no longer in the hands of those who sought to control, but in those who sought to protect. And, for the first time in history, humanity was ready to rise to that challenge. The age of destruction had ended. The age of cooperation had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.